Hi, and welcome to One E4 course, part 3. In this important chapter, the quick starter, we're going to take a quick look at the entire repertoire, and it's going to have to be a lightning fast journey because we have so much to cover. I don't even know how it is possible to call this a quick starter, but we got to do it quickly. So let's jump straight into it and cover all the Sicilians one by one. So we begin with the knight of Sicilian after 1e4 c5. Knight f3, d6 is how the knight begins. d4, the open Sicilian, is what I recommend against most of Sicilians, unless black does specific sidelines that avoid it. Against the knight, I recommend open Sicilian, so d4, c9, d4, knight f6, knight c3, and here a6. Here my recommendation is h3. And in the quick starter, we're going to take a look at three main moves that are e5, e6, and g6. We'll skip the rest. So first of all, g6, black sort of playing the dragon with moves a6 and h3 included. Not a bad idea for black. Here I recommend bishop e3. And actually, even though we have already committed to the move h3, I recommend the Yugoslav attack setup. Often we will have to play f3 anyway, since this is a really good setup defending the pawn. And our move h3 will be a little bit useless. But the move a6 is also somewhat useless, so as we'll see after. For example, bishop g7, queen d2, short castle, long castle. And now, for example, b5, f3. You see we support this pawn, guard the square, so this h-pawn is now free to go forward. Black used the extra tempo with a6 to push b5, but this counterplay is very slow. And after bishop b7, h4, knight b7, which happened in the game between Stojanovic and Grandelius. Nils Grandelius, a very strong player from Sweden, a top player from Sweden. He played this way with black, very logical, but just too slow after h5. He was already, objectively speaking, even lost, as white's attack along the h file is really fast, and black doesn't have enough counterplay here on the queen side. If10 before knight c2 or knight to d5. Both are very promising, intending h4, h5 later. So this is a short look at 6g6. 6e6 is a big move. Now we go g4. Now we'll look at two options here. There are more, in fact, but two main options, bishop e7 and d5, are covered here. So bishop e7, we go for g5. We advance our kingside pawns often. We will play h4, even though it costs us a tempo. Still, this is our plan. At knight d7, I recommend starting with bishop g2. Very clever idea. Bishop g5 is met by knight e6 and queen h5 tactic. And if knight c6, h4, our play is very quick. Even though we lost at h3 tempo, still our setup is very, very efficient. Black struggling to create counterplays. b5 is not even so easy to achieve. First go queen c7, then we go f4, b5. We take, I think this is a very nice motif to remember. We take on c6 before black gets time to protect the knight with the bishop, as after knight c6, queen c6, the queen on c6 is rather misplaced. And now bishop e3, bishop b7, and queen d4 is very good. The queen d4 is a great move, prevents d4, hits g7. If black castles and h5 becomes an issue very often. Very unpleasant position for black. e6, g4, and d5 is an important thing to cover. It's been played a lot, and at some point it was a main line for black. Position changes in character a lot. We trade in the center, ed knight d5, and play knight d2. And this is analyzed in great detail, of course. And here in the quick starter, we'll take a quick look at the main line, bishop d4, bishop g2, castle, castle. And if black takes on c3 with the knight takes and plays queen c7. I like queen d4, centralizing the queen, knight c6, and here not taking on c6 because of bishop takes c3, where black should be fine, simplifying a lot. Instead, I recommend queen c4, keeping this bishop alive. And black's main problem is the bishop on c8. If they were to trade it magically, they'd be doing really fine, but that bishop is a problem. And after bishop d6, knight e4, white is slightly better. More is, of course, in the chapter designated for this. You should know that b5 is met by queen c6 and knight f6 when yeah, we ruined black's kingside pawn structure and recovered the piece. And this is for e6 in this very brief quick starter guide. 6 e5 is arguably the main move. Knight back to f3. Bishop e7. If bishop e6 first, then knight g5 is quite unpleasant. So bishop e7 and now g4. This knight f3 and g4 setup, that is the special sauce of this course. Very uncommon idea, but a very dangerous one. And the point is that after h6 we play rook g1, and then after b5 you go g5, g knight g5, and the knight on f3 suddenly joins the attack, and the g file is half open. Very promising position. For example, bishop b7, bishop e3, knight d7, and now an important idea: a4, b4, and bishop c4. And I even got to play it once in a blitz game that I managed to win. Very nice sacrifice. bc, bishop f7, king f8, and now not going for the queen because black will have a lot of pieces for that, but bishop g6, keeping the attack, and knight e6 is a threat. Black is in big trouble. In this quick starter, we will also cover some other alternatives on the way here quickly. 11, knight d7 is a4, b4, knight d5. Typical idea: we recapture on d5 with the queen, targeting both the rook and the pawn. And if black chooses to deviate with move 9, for example g5, preventing g5 by us, it's an important move. This I also faced once. The knight d2 is important. We reroute the knight towards better square in this particular context. Now that g5 is no longer an idea, knight on f3 is done its job, and on e3 it will actually eye this weak f5 square. So after, for example, knight bd7, we have knight c4, knight c5, queen f3, followed by knight e3, and after bishop e6, we go knight c4. Again, we want to go for knight e3, and if knight e4, knight e4, d5, the simplifying operation, we keep some advantage in the endgame. After knight e5, d takes, bishop d2. Black still has to be very accurate to solve the problems here. And finally, knight c6 is covered here as well. We go for g5 at g knight g5 again, and if bishop e6, taking on e6 and rook g7, queen b6, and now a very important move, a4. Making the queen feel a little uncomfortable, and after queen b4 that has been played against me by VE, bishop d2 is very strong, and knight e4 is not possible because of rook takes e7, knight takes e7, and then queen to g4. Black is losing the knight on the pin here. Complex stuff, of course, all digested for you in the designated chapter. This is a quick starter. h6 is not the only way to play here. Black can allow g5 as well. For example, castle, we go for g5, knight h5, h4, keep advancing the pawns. Black has stopped our kingside play with the knight here, but misplaced this knight for that purpose, and now we are going to play around the d5 square very often, as the knight is unable to contribute for that purpose. For example, after bishop e6, we can start with bishop e3. And as you'll see in the chapter, yeah, we'll put a knight on d5 and sit on that square very nicely. The other way to play is bishop e6, g5, and knight to d7. Black tries to keep the knight in the game, but now h4, h5 ideas are possible. For example, bishop e3 first, knight b6, h4, knight d7, h5, rook c8, queen d2, all pretty standard. Knight c4, bishop c4, rook takes c4, and here knight h4. It's important to include this. I had a blitz game where I forgot to do that. I went b3 and long castle, and then after bishop g4, lost an exchange on the pin. Knight h4 first is important. G6 and only now b3, rook c8, long castle, queen f5, and king b2. And we neutralize the pressure along the c file. There's not much black can do here. And on the king side, we are really far advanced, and black really doesn't want to castle into that pressure along the h file. This should actually give you a good idea of what our knight of repertoire is like. And with that, let's move on. Let's start with sidelines after 2e6. So here we play d4, c4, knight d4. First, let's look at the Sicilian can, that is the fourth move, a6. And this is a big opening that's played a lot, especially when people want to keep the tension, keep more pieces on the board. And against this setup, and against similar setups whenever possible, I recommend to go for space. And here I recommend move c4, going for this Maroczy bind, allowing a hedgehog. I think nowadays White has found a lot of interesting plans to put that hedgehog setup under pressure. The setup where Black only puts their pawns on the 6th rank, very passive, a robust setup, but White has more space. And space is a lot in modern chess. So after c4, knight f6, knight c3. Bishop b4, queen d3 is covered in the chapter of the Khan Sicilian. White is doing well here. Queen c7 is the sort of the more common way to play, I believe, especially when people play the Khan to get an unbalanced game. Now we should play a3 first, preventing bishop to b4. And after b6, I like this creative idea of f4, very direct, not necessary, but very, very interesting and I think pretty strong. d6 and bishop d3, very, once again, very ambitious setup, very active setup. Bishop b7, f5, challenging this pawn immediately. It feels almost premature, but we can afford to do that with our excellent control of the center. And if knight c6, bishop e3, knight d4, bishop d4, Black's relieved somewhat the pressure on the e6 pawn, but we have developed all our pieces now. And after bishop e7, castle, castle, queen f3, we have a very nice position. Next, we want to go queen h3, putting more pressure on the soft e6 pawn. I think a beautiful position here with the centralized pieces and space in the center, thanks to our pawns on e4 and c4. This is what the Khan chapter will look like. Now let's look at 4 knight c6 here, knight c3, and now there are options once again. So the move d6 is not very good. We play a g4 here. We'll see that in the Scheveningen chapter. Very similar to this is knight f6, knight c3, d6. There we also go for g4, as you will see. Other options after knight c6, knight c3 are the Taimanov. So the a6 Taimanov and the queen c7 Taimanov. And of course the 4 knights Sicilian with knight f6. Now against the a6 Taimanov, we can take on c6. Black has to recapture with the b pawn, and now the pawn on a6 is sort of rather purposeless. And yeah, here we just finished development with bishop d3. I'm really happy with the setup that I recommend here. d5 castle, knight f6, and now this move queen f3. Very subtle idea that after bishop e7, e5, knight d7, queen to g3. Queen c7, rook e1, g6. We've got this move bishop h6. We don't let Black castle so easily. And after f6, we go for a slightly better endgame. The pawn structure here is not very pretty. You can play c4, put pressure on these soft pawns, the e6 and c6 pawns, and have a small edge here. There is a lot more to uncover here, but I think we cannot really do that. It's a quick starter. So I recommend you to look at the designated chapter. Bishop d6, rook e1 here is not very good. The main Sicilian Taimanov, that is the move 5 queen c7, bishop e3, and now a6. So here the situation is rather different. Here I recommend the move queen to f3, and this is a massive chapter. Black has a lot of different options. Most of them are actually not very good, but you have to know what to do there. Here, let's look at the main line. That is knight f6, long castle, knight e5, g3, and b5. And I recommend f4, knight eg4, and now bishop d2. Bishop g1 is the main line, but bishop d2, I really like this idea. It's been played by Jan Nepomniachtchi against Alan Pichot. And yeah, I think there is quite a lot going for this move. After b4, knight e4, h5, bishop d3, and d5. This is the way to go for Black. All theory, e5, knight e4 takes, h3, knight h6. And here, the old line was bishop b4, queen g7, which looks very tempting. But then Black actually sacrifices the pawn with rook f8 and gets counterplay here in this fashion. And Black is having all the fun here. Instead, Nepo came up with the idea of queen b3. And after bishop d7, bishop before rook b8 and bishop f8. This queen sacrifice was very strong, and I believe still very promising for white. The move rook b8 became later a thing, a recommendation of Hare Krishna, but there too I found some interesting ideas for white, some new ideas, which I think are definitely worth looking at. So that is for Timon of Sicilian with the queen on c7. The 4-knight Sicilian is another major opening, and one thing I would like to mention is there are a few different move orders to get this position. We got here with second move e6. It was also possible to start knight c6 to move 2, and then later play the move a6, e6, sorry. So there are different orders in some of these Sicilian, but here, yeah, we got it via e6. And I recommend knight db5 here. The good thing about this is that after d6, bishop f4, e5, bishop g5, we get a Sicilian Sveshnikov variation. And my recommendation also consists of this move order. And so, yeah, d6 is covered in the Sveshnikov chapter, and we only have to deal with moves like bishop b4 and bishop c5. Bishop c5 is a sideline. It's covered in the main chapter on this topic. But here, let's look at bishop b4. Simply a3, takes. And in this position, it's slightly better for white, two bishops. And yeah, let's look at a little bit here. d5, ed, bishop d3, castle. d4, for example. Yeah, I think the main move nowadays is bishop g4. White is slightly better there too, but it's covered in the chapter for this topic. Here we look at d4, knight e2, bishop g4, h3. Yeah, bishop e2. If bishop h5, then f4 leaves the bishop somewhat, well, quite somewhat in the danger zone here. So instead, bishop takes e2 is the move I consider. Then we just take rook e8, rook e1. And black has more space here in the center because of this pawn, but it's a useless space. We've got the bishop pair, open diagonals. Bishops will come onto these diagonals, and we are doing really well here. A small and a pleasant advantage. Next, we can move on to the second move. a6, a little sideline, O'Kelly Sicilian. Here too, just like against the Khan, I recommend the Maroczy bind kind of ideas. Now, black plays move like e6 or d6, we'll get these binds that are covered in the Sicilian Khan chapter. We saw a little bit already here earlier. Most principal response is knight c6, and after d4, cd, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, and e5. This is black's idea. Knight f5 and d5 looks very spectacular, but frankly, black is just trying to get a slightly worse position, as you will see. So we take cd5, bishop f5, ef5, knight d4, bishop d3, bishop 7. That's the accurate order. Castle, rook e1. Now black gets to recapture the pawn. We should just let him have that. But after knight d5, queen d5, bishop e4, queen d7. And let's make a couple more moves. Just bishop e3, rook f8, and queen g4. Just finishing development. Let's take a look at the position here. We've got fantastic control of the e4 squared. Bishop is marvelous here, eyeing all sorts of directions. Knight on d4 is standing firmly there, but isn't hitting anything in particular. Everything is well guarded. The f5 pawn is well guarded. There's no jumps the knight can perform. And at some point, we can even consider simply trading the bishop for the knight. Then the difference in these opposite colored bishops is quite striking, and with queens still present on the board, we have quite good attacking prospects. I think g3, king g2, followed by the march of the h-pawn is one of the ideas. Very often too, in the long run, when we get to push our g-pawn forward with the f-pawn, we will have a massive pawn avalanche going, and this pawn on f2 will safeguard our king. I really like these doubled f-pawns. So one helping the attack and one helping in the defense. Nice example of how doubled pawns could actually be of a lot of benefit. Another side little system is the Nimzo. It is called the Nimzo Rubinstein, I believe. In the 2 knight f6, e5, knight d5. I recommend knight c3. e6 is the main move, and here I recommend simple solution: knight d5, e d5, d4, knight c6, dc5. And after bishop c5, queen d5, black has this tricky looking line with queen b6. but we just give our f2 pawn, and it really works really well for us. After bishop f2, king e2, castle, rook f1. Our king is in the center, but we are so much better developed. The bishop on c8 is still stuck behind the pawn, and black king is in fact the one that's in danger. After bishop c5, knight g5, black is not doing very well. Knight d4, knight e6 is necessary, and after knight d4, the firm control over the d6 square is very important here. Black should try d6, ed, rook d8, then bishop d3, blocking the d file, bishop d6 and queen h5, switching to the attack, and black is in bad shape here, as you can see in the chapter. That should give you a little taste of what it's like fighting the Nimzo Rubinstein. Now let's look at 2 knight c6, d4, c knight d4. And here again, a few different systems we can touch on. Let's look at the Kalashnikovs. That is systems arising after move e5. Black creates this hole on d5, but in return gets quite some time as they're actively harassing our knight, and tries to fight for initiative with a quick development. So we play knight b5, d6 is the Kalashnikov, and now it's been knight 1 to c3. If knight f6, we get the Sveshnikov Sicilian, which we'll look at momentarily as well. Here, let's take a look at the move a6, knight a3 and b5, knight d5, and now knight f6. I recommend c4 here, b4, knight c2, a5, all still theory. In fact, this was my game against Rajabov. Main move here is knight takes e4, but then after g3 and bishop g2, we have lots of compensation. You can see that in the chapter. Here, let's look at the move a5. I played bishop g5 against Rajabov, bishop e7, I took on e7, queen e7, and knight e3. White was better after bishop e6. I took the pawn on d6, and it was better, but it is still good to take a good look at the chapter, since white does have to play quite accurately to get the advantage that we deserve. The bigger brother of the Kalashnikov, the Sveshnikov Sicilian, and that is with knight f6, knight c3 included, and e5 now. Then we go knight d5, d6 and bishop g5. The main move, I of course also considered knight d5, very trendy one, but well, first of all, for our move orders against the 4 knight Sicilian, as you remember, we need the bishop g5 line covered, and also in general, I think it's just more in line with recommendations in my courses. Very healthy approach. We are fighting for this d5 square control, and after a6, knight a3, b5, this knight is shut off the game for now, cannot join via c4 nor b5, and I recommend solving the problem immediately with this little sideline knight 1 to b1. And actually, I really like this idea. I played it myself in a very important game recently against Jan Nepomniachtchi in Bucharest. I think it's easy to play. After bishop e7, we take on f6, play a4, plant one knight on d5, bishop on c4, also nicely controlling this d5 square. Then bishop g5 castle, bishop e6, and now queen d3. Main move is a5. Nepo played king h8, then knight d2 is what I did, and I got a small advantage there. If a5, then c3, the knight can sometimes join via c3, once again reaffirming control over the d5 square. Very nice little system against the Sveshnikov Sicilian, I believe. Yeah, Kalashnikov with e5, knight b5 can also be played with move a6. This is a sideline. We go knight d6, bishop d6, queen d6, queen f6, and queen d1. Queen g6, knight c3, d5 stuff doesn't quite work. We take on d5, queen e4, and bishop e3. And after knight d4, knight c7, king e7. Rook c1 is slightly better for white, but the main line is bishop e2. And you can see in the chapter the complications that arise here are in white's favor, for sure. Let's move on now and take a look at the classic Sicilian. That is this position arising after black has played knight c6, d6, and knight f6 in the open Sicilian. It can be done in different orders. Black can start with d6, can start with knight c6 as well. It depends on what kind of sidelines they want to allow, but we don't care. We go for this anyway. Here I recommend the rouser with bishop g5. I wish I could recommend something sort of more more surprising, something more original, but I believe that the Rouser is just the most critical approach against Black Sicilian. And this is a very, very big chapter in the course. So we'll discuss it very briefly here. Black has a lot of options down the line. So e6 is the main one, queen d2, bishop e7 and short castle after long castle. Certainly a big possibility. A lot of old games continue this way. Now I recommend this rare move h4, which I think is very strong. After knight d4, queen a5, can be 1 rook d8. Some players played this way, but after queen d2, queen c7 and bishop d3, Black doesn't really have good play in the center, and the move rook d8 is a waste of time, and we're going for the usual f3, g4, and potentially g5 as this bishop moves back. The usual kingside play here in the in these kind of positions. The main move is 7 a6, no doubt, long castle, bishop d7. And this position is also covered in great detail. King b1 is the move I recommend. Not committing to f3 nor f4 just yet. I really like this. And now most players play bishop e7. Already, perhaps a small inaccuracy. You can take on c6 and play f3. And the bishop now is really misplaced on c6, as you will see. After b5, h4 is good. We should make sure we don't blunder knight takes e4 trick after knight e2. This bishop is hanging, so we protect it first. And after queen c7, knight e2, h6, bishop e3. The knight is heading to d4. Bishop on c6 will have to step back, and these queenside pawns are not quite advancing as easily as our kingside pawns. d5, e5 is my game against MVL. e5 is a thematic idea. Queen e5, bishop f4, always trapping the queen. So not good for Black to take that. And after knight d7, f4, we get sort of a French pawn structure. Knight on d4 is really sitting very nicely. And in this particular position, having played b5 as well, Maxim didn't have a good place to castle, and he actually castled long eventually. But yeah, there his king found no safety, and I won a nice game. Knight d4 is the latest word of fashion. Black divides white queen to d4, where apparently it's maybe not as well placed as you would think. Bishop e7, and here I recommend. I look at the main line with f4, but I also recommend this funky little idea, rook g1. Very, very clever, clever stuff. Keeping the options open. Often we want to go for g4 and drop the bishop back and go for g5. Push our queens, the kingside pawns, and save on this move f3, which is the main move. Instead, the move rook g1 could prove itself to be more useful in some cases. In any case, the line I'll look at here is castle. Now f4 is very, very nice. For example, rook c8, e5 is it's a problem. After d, fe, knight d5, bishop e7, queen e7, knight d5. Knight d5 wouldn't be much, but knight e4 is very nice, heading towards the d6 square. And white is slightly better. A lot more, of course, once again, in these chapters. Classical Sicilian was a very big system that had to cover a lot of sidelines there. All also very, very interesting, and require good play by white, good energetic play. So definitely check that out. But I think for the purpose of the quick starter, we have dealt with it. Now lots of Sicilians we had to look at. We still have a few left. We've got the Scheveningen Sicilian that I briefly mentioned before. Let's say after e6, d4, cd, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, d6. This could be the order. Could also be e4, c5, knight f3, and then d6, d4, cd, knight d4, knight c3. And now e6. Once we have this Scheveningen setup, we have a very strong idea of g4 here. Well, it's not an idea. It's a major line. It's called the Keres attack, and I think Black is still struggling to equalize against it. I'll look at it in great detail. There are some trendy moves here, but I look at h6 in the quick starter, perhaps the main one. We go for rook g1. Smart move order, delaying h4 for now. Then c6, bishop e3. Now d5 is not very tempting. Black is not well developed for this kind of central push. So a6 is what Black usually plays. Now I like to take. Often when Black has played a6, taking becomes very attractive in these Sicilians. So after bc, the move a6 turned out to be a waste of time. Queen f3 and long castle is very nice. We'll see similar positions also a lot in the time man of Sicilians with queen on f3. Black's b file doesn't do us too much harm after queen a5. For example, we have this bishop c4 to b3 idea. And in the meantime, on the king side, we are going to go for attack with h4, g5. Sometimes also queen g3, f4 is an idea. Very, very easy position for white to play, and a very good one as well. This is the Scheveningen Sicilian for you. And now there are also still a few lines left. So there's the Dragon Sicilian. And there are different move orders. So against the pure Dragon is this where black goes d6, and then after d4 takes the knight f6, and then g6. We have already committed the knight to c3. And here we don't have the option of going for the Mark-Bind setup. Instead, we go for the Yugoslav attack. That's bishop e3, queen f3, queen d2. Bishop e3, sorry, pawn f3 and queen d2. Very nice setup. f3 pawn guards from knight g4, protects the e4 pawn. And we want to go for h4, h5 attack and trade the bishop with bishop h6. All of the good stuff. Let's look at some lines. Bishop e3, bishop g7, knight g4, bishop b5 is a nice trap. Black is just losing a full piece there. If you want to verify to do so, surprisingly, black loses a full piece. And so bishop g7 is the right order. Now we go f3, castle, queen d2, then c6, and a long castle. And here d5 is the best move. If black plays bishop d7, g4, rook c8, yeah, black is just way too slow. For example, king b1, knight e5, bishop d2, knight c4, takes, and h4, h5, gh, knight h5. White has already a semi-open g file to work with, while black has achieved nothing at all on the queen side. So rook g1, king h7, queen d3, rook c8, and rook g5. Already just some serious threats here lining up against the king. So black hasn't even started any play. So this is very, very bad. Black should go for d5, move 9. I recommend taking and going bishop d4. Now in my course for black, I went for e5, bishop c5, rook e8, which I still think is perhaps the best way for black to play. And now I'm going for just the main line of my own course, knight e4, queen c7, h4, f5, knight d6, rook d8, knight c8, rook c8, h5, knight b6, and bishop b6. And after rook d2, bishop c4, king f8, bishop c7, rook d1, rook d1, rook c7, hg6, bishop h6, king b1, hg, rook d6, g7 b4, all theory. My course ends around here, and I give more lines, in fact, for black. I think many players that have bought my course, they haven't studied these lines that I give from here, because I think it's very important for black to do so. As we had seen in tournament practice, white does win some games here. White has won already 3 wins. 3 games, sorry, Sujic Naroditsky, Kolarz Blomqvist, and Kovacevic Nikolovsky. And black has made just 1 draw, which goes to show that this is still a difficult position to play. Black has to know a lot, and even these grandmasters were not well enough prepared, haven't studied all the intricacies of my book. And so I see no need not to recommend this for white. I think the stats are good, and it's also a risk-free position. So my recommendation against my own course will be that. Against the main line with 12 bishop takes d4, I recommend queen d4, queen b6, knight a4. And white will be slightly better in these kind of positions. For example, queen c7, bishop c4, rook d8, knight c5, preventing bishop from coming to e6. Bishop f5, bishop b3. We have really blocked the b file, blocked the c pawn, blocked all the counterplay on the queen side, and just have a small positional edge. We have this 2 pawn islands to black's 3, which means black has more weaknesses, more pawn weaknesses, and yeah, this should be something small to count on in the endgame. After knight f4, queen f2, takes, rook d8, rook e1. Variation continues here. We don't mind. We don't mind even more trade sometimes. Trading queens gives us a nice endgame potentially. Very importantly, our king is very safe. So yeah, all well known. And all in the Dragon chapter, white is pleasantly better here. There are also these accelerated Dragon stuff, and that is after, for example, knight c6, d4, cd knight d4, and g6. Against this order, we shouldn't do the same thing, because if we keep playing the same way, the Yugoslav attack, you will discover that having delayed d6, black will go d5 in one go. And that will be a big problem for us. But instead, we can use black's move order. As they have delayed knight f6 as well, we haven't put our knight to c3 yet. We can go for the Markovsky bind with c4. Knight f6, knight c3, d6, for example, bishop e2, bishop g7, bishop e3, just the main line, castle, castle, bishop d7, rook e1. I like this modern approach. Knight d4, bishop d4, bishop c6, queen c2. In the old days, they played f3 a lot, but I don't think we need to weaken our dark squares around the king. Instead, I just like to protect the pawn with the queen. Knight e5, b3, preventing further expansion. Knight d7, we can take the dark square bishop. We might have a bad bishop on paper, as we have a lot of pawns on the light squares. But reasonably recently, I heard an interesting observation. Because I always felt like this bad bishop situation is not always clear to me. Why sometimes the bishop indeed bad, and sometimes position like that, why it is just slightly better. And I think what I heard was very true. So it is actually the space that is an important factor. So when you have more space, this bad bishop thing is not a thing anymore. And there is logic to that. If your pawns are on the color of your bishop, but they are so far advanced, you still have a lot of space behind them, a lot of mobility for your bishop. While black's bishop, has the dark squared pawns around it, it would have a lot of squares to move, but having little space, it actually has very little squares to move around. So that makes quite a lot of sense to me. And here, having more space, yeah, the best bishop situation is really not an issue at all. And in fact, white has good attacking prospects on the king side. Potentially, the h-pawn can get active. In case of an eventual knight d5, bishop d5, ed, we'll have the e pressure along the e file on the e7 pawn. And yeah, the black king is a little softened up here due to the pawn on g6. Typical Markovsky bind kind of lectures here. More of that, of course, in the Markovsky bind chapter on the dragon. F7, knight d4, queen d4, bishop g7 is the other option here. This position is like quite similar with castle, queen d3. This is a modern way to play. There's no need to dislike the square. It's actually a pretty fine square. a5, bishop e3, bishop d7, b3, bishop c6, and f3. The good old setup is quite nice here. Knight d7, rook c1, knight c5, queen d2. And this could arise from some other order. And I guess queen b6. It's important here to stop this queen b4 idea when a4 becomes a threat. And this knight b5 move is pretty nice, blocking the queen here. And after rook f8, rook d1, black starts waiting, but eventually we can get around to start doing things. For example, bishop f1, g3, bishop g2 is an idea, and then in the long run, f4 will be the plan. And so a lot of slow plans there for white. In the Markovsky bind, one other thing I want to mention here, and that is if black tries to do both of those things, so delay d6, but play knight f6 and play the dragon here with knight c6, knight f6, and g6, then we punish it with knight takes c6, and bc e5 is a problem. And that is also covered, of course, in the dragon chapters. So this leaves us very far. Let's take a look at what we looked at, just to make sure. We looked at the Najdorf. Scheveningen was covered. Kalashnikov and Sveshnikov were covered. Classical Sicilian was covered. Nimzo, Rubinstein, sideline was covered. Dragon, all sorts of dragons were covered. Markovsky, non-Markovsky. Khan was covered. Taimanov with a6. Taimanov with queen c7. Sicilian for knights. We only have one sideline left to cover here. And after two knight c6, I think this is where it's written down. d4, cd, knight d4, queen b6 is the so-called Greva Sicilian. Maybe the most popular of these sidelines, but there are a lot of those sidelines. There are actually two chapters for it: the e6, two e6 sidelines, and non-two e6 sidelines. I think in the quick starter we discuss only this one sideline, but there are more. So here we recommend knight b3, knight f6, knight c3. After e6, I've looked at this actually quite a bit. It's not so bad what black is doing. They try to misplace our knight from the center and gets a reasonably healthy Scheveningen setup. For some reason, the old main line is queen e2, which is a little artificial. I prefer, well, most normal looking move, to be honest, bishop d3, just developing the bishop. And after a6, bishop e3, queen c7 and f4, d6 and now g4, just all very logical, natural, aggressive, keeping black under pressure, just pushing the pawns forward. Modern chess here at full display, b5, g5, knight d7, and queen e2. Important idea to know. So when black's bishop is already on e7, queen h5 becomes a nice little provocation. You want to provoke g6. But with the bishop still on f8, you don't want to provoke g6 because then black might use that to put the bishop to g7. So here we play queen e2. After bishop b7, we castle long, bishop b7. King b1 is almost always a useful move in these positions. A short castle and just rook h2 f1. The rook's useful on the f-file. Sometimes also the rook lift is an idea. And after knight c5, taking queen f2 is quite nasty here. I believe this brings us to the end of this quick starter. I think you have a good idea of what the repertoire is about. It consists of some sharp variations. For example, the Keres attack against the Scheveningen Sicilian, queen f3 against the Taimanov, very sharp. The Rouser against classical Sicilian. Also the Yugoslav attack against the Dragon. Also some of the lines are positional, where we go for the space. The Marxi bind against the Dragons. When black chooses these different move orders. Also, we grab space against the Khan and against the Okeli Sicilian with 2a6. So a mixed bag of things. The sidelines are also covered. The Nimzo Rubinstein we had seen. We're going for this knight c3, knight d5, the simple approach there. So it's always, showing the full diversity of chess. It's hard to do, a universal approach, the same setup against everything. That just doesn't quite work in the modern high-level chess. Sometimes, when they provoke us too much, we have to go and punish them. If the position demands us to go for g4, we go for g4. If the position demands us to go for space and slow grind, we go for space and slow grind. This is how I treat chess, and I think you now have a very good idea of the repertoire. But don't be fooled. You are, of course, you're ready to try it out, but you can only get more ready if you look at the chapters with all the details. There is so much more to uncover than either if we haven't even seen the half of it, frankly. There's so many fascinating lines that I'm showing in the Night of chapter, and well, pretty much everything was just touched on very briefly. A lot more is there in the chapters, so definitely take a good look at them when you get the time. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next chapter.